Astroroom е катчев кој што ги обединуваат звездите од сите области, но во денешна смисла ќе се сложите дека најголемите звезди се во областа на маркетингот, оние кои што ги продаваат нештата со своите креативни идеи. Во таа смисла вечер имаме еден одличен соговорник, многу влијателен човек во таа област, господинот Дейв Birss. Mr. Birss, I tried to find the title. And I find that you're an author, you're a public speaker, consultant, filmmaker, modern marketing and media advisor, let's say some kind of guru nowadays. So what do you think are the people from this area the most influential people of nowadays?
Who are the most influential in the world of marketing or the world of
I mean, all meanings, because you sell, you tell people what is good, what is bad, and what to do, where to go.
I'm just a man with opinions, and there's lots of people with good opinions. I think in the world of marketing, I think that Seth Godin has been absolutely fantastic for years as a thinker who's challenging the world of marketing. I think that in the worlds of technology, there's lots of people with opinions, but not all of their opinions are valid. I think there's a lot of people who are saying things that everyone else is saying. So we get the echo chamber in lots of industries. And I think that in the world of marketing and the world of technology, there's lots of people who are saying the same thing. And if you're saying the same thing that everyone else is saying, it's not very valuable. So there's lots of people who are who we're seeing a lot in the media, but it doesn't mean that what they're saying is worth listening to. But I wouldn't count myself as a guru. I'd rather be an amateur. I think it's important to be an amateur. I think if someone defines himself as a guru, it's kind of saying, I know everything. I know it all. And I think that there's a much more powerful position to be in by saying, I don't know everything. I'm always learning. I've got to be learning. And when you look at the root of the word amateur, it's got the word for love at the beginning of it. It basically, amateur means somebody who does things that they love. And that is an important thing. I think it's better, therefore, to be an amateur than to be a guru. So if anyone thinks they're a guru, let's just ignore them.
When I told my friends who am I going to talk with, somebody told me, oh, the biggest cheaters.
Yeah.
You have to sell something that is not that good and say it's very good. And what about the ethics in the business?
In advertising, yeah. There are a lot of laws, and certainly the advertising I was having to do in the UK and in Europe, you can't lie. You can't lie, but I'm happy to say I left the industry. I left the industry 8 years ago, and I'm not in it anymore, so I don't consider myself to be an advertising guy anymore. But I think that ethics is always a problem, and I think it's a problem in a lot of industries. I don't like that people can go into an office and then not act like a normal, decent human. Whichever industry they're in, whether that's advertising, whether that's working for a bank, whether it's working for a government, if you go into an office and you react differently to the way you would outside the office, I think there's a problem. because we need to be humans. We need to understand that everything we do is about humans. Humans are the most important thing, not the corporation. And there's a problem that I have with people who separate business and everyday relationships, and they say, oh, no offense, this is just business. No, I've got a problem with that, because I think that everything is about humans. And this absolutely nothing to do with any of the book, but this is something that I very much think is important, and I think it's important in the advertising industry. I think it's important in every industry, that we do not forget that everything is about humans, and that we have a responsibility in the world to the other humans around us.
You say that people tend to copy more than create.
Yes.
I'm in the media business more than 20 years, and you know that I do my way. I believe that way, but how can I convince people that culture talks about culture, literature, art is important and they can benefit from that? It's hard to sell the product. What to do in this case?
Well, you know, when I say that people copy more than come up with original things, it's not always a bad thing. So when everything that we do, we can look at and say it's a recombination of something else. So our job, I believe, is to keep improving things. And if we're saying that we want to be original, you know, it's almost impossible to be original. There's a phrase in the Bible from about 3,000 years ago that says there's nothing new under the sun. You know, and there's very few things that we can think of as new. So when we look at our smartphones, a smartphone is like a combination of an old phone and a computer coming together to create something new. We've got a computer in a phone. So everything is a combination of other elements. But I think when it comes to trying to convince other people that this is important for them to listen to, that's quite a difficult thing to do, and people won't change unless they want to change. And I think that the people we sometimes need to convince are people in business, that they want, and for that I think we have to always look from their point of view and go, what's the value that they need? What's the value that they're looking for? How can I position this in a way, how can I talk to them about this in a way that shows it's valuable to them? And when we understand that some people might measure success or value of something by money, some people might measure it by how entertaining it is, some people might measure it by how much they're going to learn from it. And it's if we understand people's motivations, that's always our way to sell things to people, to convince them, is to look at it from their point of view and tell them how it's relevant to them.
But you convinced us that it's possible to break the routine. You helped yourself, you boost your creativity by breaking routines, because you had a problem, you were stuck with your mind, and you changed the way to go somewhere, you change the streets, habits, brushing your teeth, as I saw somewhere. So you even start to draw with the wrong hand.
Yeah.
That was the strangest experiment that you did in your life?
I've done quite a lot of strange experiments with myself. So yes, one of them was with a friend from Belgrade, and
Dereta.
Ray Dereta, and the two of us have been talking about, actually, let's conduct an experiment on ourselves and see what we can learn about ourselves. And what we did was we decided that we would try and teach our other hand to draw. So I'm right-handed, and I would draw every single day for a month. I draw a self-portrait with my left hand. He's left-handed, he would draw a self-portrait every day with his right hand. And the incredible thing was that after a week, we found that we could draw pretty much as well with the opposite hand. That was us having done 7 portraits, that we could draw pretty much as well with the other hand. But if you were to ask anyone, if you were to ask either of us before we tried that experiment, can you draw with your wrong hand? We'd have said, no. After a week, only because we tried it, did we realize we could do it. It just took a little bit of practice. And it's an interesting thing when a lot of people, what it taught us was that when a lot of people say, no, I can't do that, they're missing off a word. And that word is yet. No, I cannot do that yet. And that is a really important lesson to learn. So when we do experiments, it's very much to see what can we learn from it. And I've run experiments to see, one of my experiments was to see if alcohol makes you more creative.
To beer or not to beer?
Yeah.
That is the question.
And the answer is beer.
I saw you have a guide about that.
Yeah.
And what people say? Did you have a bad reaction on that? Like he recommends an alcohol, is it okay or not?
It depends on the industry. And it depends on the country as well. So I did it in quite a jokey way. I wasn't being serious. But I mean, we quite seriously did the experiment. We got proper research to do it and got proper results back. But it was just one experiment, you know, which is why I say to people that I recommend that they conduct the experiment themselves on a weekly basis to see if alcohol will make them more creative.
One experiment equal to one beer or how many beers? What was the...
Well, what we found from our results was that people, we allowed, we took 10 advertising creatives and 10 of them were only allowed to drink water for 3 hours and 10 of them could drink as much as they liked. So some of them got quite drunk and we actually had to send them home. They got so drunk that one of them fell asleep behind a seat and we had to...
So there is a red line.
Yeah, there is a line. And research seems to show, not my research, but other research seems to show that maybe like 2 glasses of wine is quite good. And there are reasons for it. So in our sort of frontal brain, we've got a region which is basically, it's the little voice in your shoulder that says, no, you can't say that. No, you can't do that. And when you drink, that little voice is the first part of your brain to get drunk. And that little man in there who's saying, no, you can't do that, falls over very quickly after about a pint. And then people feel they're more free to do the things they wouldn't normally do, which is why we see people without any trousers jumping in a fountain when they're drunk enough. But your judgment comes down. And one of the reasons that we don't tend to come up with as many ideas very often is because we're judging ourselves. And we're saying that I can't say that. People will think I'm an idiot. I'm going to look like a fool if I say this. But when you're drinking, that little voice goes away. And so this is why we believe that the alcohol experiment, all it was showing is that when this little voice is quietened down, then actually you feel more free to say the silly things that you wouldn't normally say. And very often the smartest ideas come from the silliest of thoughts.
When are people more creative? When they work under the pressure or when they free their minds?
Oh, we've got a real problem with pressure in office environments. The office environment is the equivalent of the prairie of 30,000 years ago, when people were running from wild beasts. And what happened when people ran from wild beasts? They would get frightened for a short period of time, and then when they survived, it'd be like, oh, right, I can relax again. But when you're in an office, there's a constant level of stress from the politics. And what happens if you imagine that you were on the plains in ancient days trying to run from a beast? You don't go, hold on a sec, I could go there. Let's brainstorm this. Where are we going to run to? Let's have a think. We could climb a tree, but I'm not very good at climbing trees. We could run in that direction. What would happen if we just rolled into a ball and kept very still? You know, you're not going to come up with these options. You're just going to go, there's a cave over there and I'm running as fast as I can. And you go directly from where you are to where you think the solution is. And that's exactly the same that happens when you're stressed in an office. You don't look at the options. You just go, what's the most obvious solution for me? What's the fastest solution for me to get there? Which means that you're not actually thinking about things properly. You are just taking an obvious solution. And if we're to look at how we measure creativity, we measure it, the way we should look at measuring it is with obviousness. So if an idea is obvious, it's not creative because it's a first thought. To get to a non-obvious idea, it takes effort. We have to think about things. We have to consider other options. We have to challenge our own thinking to get to these non-obvious places. You have to have a certain amount of awareness of different things in the world to be able to get to non-obvious ideas. And that, I guess, in the office, we're finding that when people are stressed, don't go for the non-obvious ideas. They go for the quickest, easiest solution. And in business, that doesn't really help you that much. It's not going to make you different from other companies. It's not going to give you an advantage over other companies. It's just, you're going to end up just doing the same thing again and again and again. And that won't affect your results.
You've said we all thought that technology was going to give us more time.
Yes.
And where and when we went wrong. What happened?
Yeah, well, you know, it's not really technology's fault. It's actually about flaws in humans themselves. So humans are intrinsically lazy. If you think of every single invention that has been created, really, it's because humans are lazy. It's to allow us to do less work. So the invention of the wheel. Hey, that meant that we don't need to carry as much stuff. It's going to be easier to move things. But it means we don't have to carry as much. You think of just about any invention, it's been to make it easy. The invention of the map meant we didn't have to remember things in our head. We could actually just look at it there. And then the invention of Google Maps meant we didn't need to take a map or read a map. This is going to tell us without us having to work at it. So what has happened over time is that we have outsourced our own brain power to devices. So we've outsourced our memories. So I don't know, when was the last time you memorized a phone number? No,
I cannot even remember.
I remember my phone number from being a child, 942-4302. That was my home phone number. It's been disconnected for years. But that was my home phone number because we remembered phone numbers.
You always recall that memory? Or how to keep in mind?
But now we don't remember phone numbers. We just prod a name on a screen. So we're outsourcing our memories. And even when we're at events, we're videoing things. So it's the children's school play. People are holding their phones up and looking at the school play through a tiny screen rather than actually using their eyes and enjoying the experience. So we're outsourcing our memories to devices. We're outsourcing our processing power. So we're not doing mathematics. We're using the calculator in our phones. And we're starting to outsource our decision making to algorithms. So that means that a lot of the things we used to do in our brains, we're outsourcing to technology because humans are lazy. If the technology can do it, I won't bother doing it. But the human brain is the smallest it's been in 10,000 years. And the reason for that is because the brain prunes the parts it doesn't need. And it's actually something we know that happens in teenage years, is that the brain reassembles itself and it cuts off the parts that haven't been used. And that's what's happened over time, is our brains have shrunk because we don't need to know how to memorize an entire area of space so that we know how to get home, because we've got Google Maps now. And the more that we outsource stuff, the smaller our brains are going to become. So our brains have not stopped. I don't believe they will stop shrinking, because the more that we outsource to computers and technology, the weaker our brains become. The weaker our brains become, the harder it's going to be for us to come up with interesting ideas. And I think that technology could potentially have a negative impact on the development of humanity over the next few years.
The purpose of your visit is all web conference, and of course the promotion of your first book in Cyrillic, and the second one will be soon. Here. So we are talking about a user guide to the creative mind. In Macedonian, you can even read it, and it's very exotic to you, I know.
Upastwo za potrzeba na kreatywniot
Excellent.
That's as good as I can do, I'm afraid, in Macedonian.
Who can use this guide? Everyone. It's you can apply it everywhere, in companies, in everyday life.
It's kind of divided into 3 different sections, and the first section explains to everyone how we come up with ideas. And coming up with ideas is a process, and explain the process at the beginning so that you get to understand that you need to put things into your head to be able to get ideas coming out of your head. The second part looks at techniques that are all about, if you're struggling to come up with ideas, how do you then get the ideas going again? So the most valuable piece of advice there is to go to the pub, which I've got in there.
Beer.
Yes. And then the last section is actually its techniques that you can use to come up with ideas. So these are ways of thinking about things in a different way to come up with ideas you wouldn't normally have. So certainly the first two sections are very applicable to everyone. The last section, there are lessons that everyone can use, but it's really, really helpful for people in marketing and advertising, particularly. So it's especially helpful for people in marketing, but it works for everyone. There's things in here that anyone can learn.
The other one is out of my mind.
Yes.
It will be in Macedonian too. And I mentioned all web conference. What can you say? What people in Macedonia think about the world processes and what people abroad think about these countries? Are we on the same level of this modern digital way of doing things?
You know, every country is slightly different, and it's got there's cultural reasons why people do things in certain ways. There's how much technology is available in each country, and it's not to do with any country being more advanced than any other country. It's just to do with the culture and the environment itself. Now, there's obviously history in the Balkans and with former communism and all sorts of things that lead to how technology is used and how people behave. That is different from the UK, where I come from, and the UK is different from America, where my wife is from. So it's not about anyone being more advanced, it's just to do with how we use the technology based on our circumstances, based on our history, based on the environment that we live in. And I've got to say that there's some very exciting things happening here. There's phenomenal people in Macedonia.
An excellent Ivar, so
Oh,
that's the product we can sell
and I
in the
love
world.
Ivar. Have you been told that I'm addicted to Ivar? So,
I've heard somewhere,
yes.
that's why I'm asking you.
So my friend Darko, about 5 years ago, he introduced me to Ivar, and I just fell in love with Ivar. And for the last 5 years, I've always had an open jar of Ivar at home. I've converted my wife to enjoying Ivar, to have it with her sort of bread and cheese and a bit of Ivar. Oh yes, I've always got a little bit of Macedonia at home, and now there's a little bit of me in Macedonia all the time. So it's great.
So how do you react when you have a great idea, let's say Ivar, excellent product, and the client reject it? What do you do when you're convinced that you can sell that idea or idea about the product, and you cannot convince the client?
Well, you know, when people in business, when they say no, they very often don't mean no. What they mean is, I don't feel confident enough to say yes, which is very, very different. So there was a situation I had a few years ago where I had a large client, one of the world's biggest brands, and I went in with an advertising idea for them. And I was confident about it. And I went in and the contract they had was that we had to present 3 ideas to them. And I went in to the meeting and I said, I've got 3 ideas for you, as I'm contractually obligated to give you. I said, but these 2 ideas I don't want to show you. And I ripped them up and I put them on the floor. At that point, the client's like, I said, because this one is right. It's absolutely right for you. And I presented it to them and they were like, yeah, we see why you say that, but no. So why not? I said, no, we feel it's off-brand. No, they were wrong. That's an excuse that a lot of companies use because they don't understand. So I left the meeting on a Friday and I thought about it over the weekend. And on the Monday morning, I went into my advertising agency and I got the business manager at the advertising agency, said, call the client up. I want to sell the same idea to them this morning. And he's like, you can't do that. I said, why can't I do that? I said, okay, so he phoned up the client. I said, look, I want your permission. I'm going to try and sell the same idea to you. And the client was a bit taken aback. And I'm like, okay. I said, I sold it to them. I told all the reasons why they should go for this idea. And I eventually managed to convince them to go for it. The idea ran, it picked up lots of awards, and it was hugely successful. And the thing that they said to me afterwards is nobody has ever done that before. To have the confidence to say, I believe you were wrong in your judgment, and I think that you should really go for that. And it was because I was so confident, I was willing to go back to them and tell them they were wrong. And people in business don't tend to do that. And people won't put their job on the line, because I was ready to be fired for this if it came to it.
Okay, so the biggest advice would be trust yourself, be confident.
If you're going to try and sell something to a client and you don't show your own confidence in it, why should the client be confident about it? If you go and say, I've got 3 ideas, you choose, you're not showing that you're confident in any of them.
And how do you react when you receive a bad review, bad critics or something?
I've got no problem with it.
With the ego, with the...
I've not got big ego.
Okay.
I don't mind at all. You know, if you're going to do something that's different, you're going to always polarize. You're going to get some people who love it and some people who hate it. And I understand that that's the case. And if there's people that hate what I do and want to tell me that they hate what I do, I'm okay with that. I've got no problem with that at all. And I'm not, I think it's important for us not to worry about these kind of things, because it's the worry about people not liking what we do that causes us to create smaller ideas. But if we don't care what other people think, then we can come up with ideas as big as we want.
And can we conclude what is the most important thing about the idea to be creative, revolutionary, original, not conventional?
None of those things.
What?
They're not important.
What
They're
is the
good.
most?
The most important thing is that you solve your problem.
Great.
So if you solve your problem, so if we imagine that it's going to be valuable to you if you solve your problem, that's the most important thing. But if that's one axis there, that's you want it to solve the problem. And then the other axis here is how obvious it is. So most ideas that people come up with are pretty obvious, and that means they're not quite as valuable as they could be. Where I try to take people is I want them to get to solve the problem and be non-obvious. And if you're non-obvious and you're solving the problem, that's massively valuable, because if you're doing it in a way that's different, people will notice you, you'll have an advantage over your competitors, you're going to, it's going to impact your business in a bigger way than just doing what everyone else is doing. However, the most important thing from those 2 axes is that you solve your problem. It's better to solve your problem in an obvious way than it is to not solve your problem in a way that isn't obvious.
And at the beginning, let's back on the book. And what do you think about the translations in other languages? Is there a problem about the terminology, because this area is raised in a modern time, born in the modern time?
Yeah.
There is a problem because English words are all over the world,
Yes.
and to convince people to find the local term or to be close to the English terms.
I would prefer that people do it in a way that's local. But I think that...
Is it possible?
I don't know. I speak 2 languages, and they're both the same language, really. I'm Scottish, so I speak English, but Scots has been seen as a separate language. It's just, it's a variant of English. But I think it's better if we can to have our own words for things. But of course, one of the things that people will often laugh about in the UK is how other languages use English words. So you'll hear the other language spoken, and then you'll get the word internet in the middle of their sentence. And I guess that's all right. But in France, I know that there's a big movement to move away from that and to come up with French words rather than using English words. So rather than using internet, there's been a movement to try and use other words that are more sort of local versions of the word. So I kind of like people to have their own language. But I couldn't tell you how well translated this is, but I was talking last night to the translator, and she seemed to know what she was doing. The only pages that I really properly understand in this book is in page 70. There's Sudokus in here, which I find very funny.
It's universal.
So I understand the Sudokus. I couldn't tell you anything else about the book or the terms, I'm afraid.
Okay, and the last one would be, what is your next plan? You're writing, and how many years you need to your thought to ferment it? How do you say it?
Ferment, yeah.
Ferment,
Yeah.
to start writing, and now you think that the writing is thinking. It's the same thing. It's not that easy, actually. But
yes, it's not easy at all. I mean, this year I'll have been involved in 8 published books, of which I've fully written 4. So that's just this year. So I'm currently trying to work out. I'm taking a little bit of a break from writing just now, and I'm currently trying to work out what my next book will be. But while I'm doing that, because I'm a filmmaker, my next project is I've got a documentary I'm about to start filming in 2 weeks, and I'm probably going to be doing a chat show as well, beginning of next year. So I'll be doing what you do.
I will be from the other side.
So film is a lot of my next few months are sort of concentrating on film, but I'm always looking for projects, always looking for new things to do, and goodness knows, it may be that in 3 weeks' time I get an idea for another book and I just start writing it. I don't know.
Okay, I wish you all the success with the books in Macedonian, and don't lose your creativity and don't lose your curiosity, actually.
Yes.
Because that lead you
Yeah.
and push you to go always in front of others. So thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you very much indeed.